The mirror shattered against the stone wall with a sound like breaking hearts, sending shards of silver glass cascading across Lady Isadora Ravencroft's bedchamber floor like fallen tears. Each fragment reflected a piece of her face, the unmarked left side that had once been called beautiful, and the right side that bore the jagged scar running from her temple to her jaw, the mark that had transformed her from society's darling into its most pitied outcast. "Monster," she whispered to her fractured reflection, the word that had been whispered behind fans and spoken aloud by cruel children echoing in the sudden silence. Hideous creature, ruined. 3 years. 3 years since the carriage accident that had stolen not just her beauty, but her entire future, leaving her with a face that made grown men flinch and society matrons cross themselves as if her scars were contagious. 3 years of watching former friends turn away, of seeing potential suitors flee at the sight of her, of becoming the cautionary tale mothers told their daughters about the fragility of feminine worth. "My lady?" Sarah, her faithful maid, appeared in the doorway with obvious concern. "I heard the crash. Are you—" "I'm perfectly fine," Isadora lied, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her chest. "Just clumsy. You know how I am with mirrors these days." It was the 7th mirror she had broken in as many months, but Sarah was too kind to mention it. Instead, the older woman simply began sweeping up the glass with practiced efficiency, her movements careful and deliberate. "The Earl of Pemberton has arrived for tea," Sarah said quietly, not meeting Isadora's eyes. "Your father is expecting you in the drawing room." Isadora's stomach clenched with familiar dread. Another suitor, another man who had been convinced by her substantial dowry to overlook her unfortunate disfigurement, at least until he saw her in person. The Earl would take one look at her scarred face, make polite conversation for exactly the appropriate amount of time, and then find some excuse to withdraw his suit. It was a dance she had performed a dozen times now, each rejection cutting deeper than the last. "Tell me, Sarah," Isadora said, moving to her wardrobe to select yet another gown designed to draw attention away from her face. "Do you think there's any point to this charade? Any possibility that a man might actually want to marry me for something other than my father's money?" "I think," Sarah said carefully, "that the right man will see past the scar to the woman beneath. You're still beautiful, my lady. Still kind and intelligent and worthy of love." "Am I?" "Because society seems to have reached a different conclusion." Isadora selected a high-necked dress in deep blue, hoping the color might distract from the angry red line that marked her face. "According to the gossips, I'm a cautionary tale about the dangers of vanity, a monster hiding behind powder and paint. Society is made up of fools who judge worth by appearance alone," Sarah said firmly. "But not everyone is so shallow, my lady. Somewhere out there is a man who will see your true value." Isadora wanted to believe her. Truly she did. But after 3 years of rejection and pity, hope had become a luxury she could no longer afford. The drawing room was precisely as she had expected. Her father, Lord Ravencroft, making awkward conversation with a man who kept glancing toward the door with barely concealed nervousness. The Earl of Pemberton was younger than her usual suitors, perhaps 30 to her 23, with the soft look of a man who had never faced real hardship. "Ah, Isadora," her father said with forced cheer as she entered. "Come meet the Earl, my lord, my daughter, Lady Isadora." Isadora watched the exact moment when the Earl's polite smile froze on his face, when his eyes found her scar and his expression shifted from anticipation to barely concealed horror. She had seen that look so many times now that she could predict it to the second. "My lord," she said, curtsying with practiced grace while keeping the unmarked side of her face toward him as much as possible. "Lady Isadora," the Earl managed, his voice strained. That is, you look lovely." The lie hung in the air between them, like a bad smell. Isadora took her seat and prepared for another hour of stilted conversation and sideways glances, another exercise in mutual discomfort that would end with polite excuses and private relief. "I trust your journey from London was pleasant?" she asked, falling back on the safe topics that filled these encounters. "Quite pleasant, yes, though I confess the roads were rather challenging." The Earl's eyes kept darting to her scar despite his obvious efforts to look elsewhere. "I hope the weather holds for my return journey." Already planning his escape, Isadora noted with bitter amusement. They hadn't even been served tea yet, and he was already thinking about leaving. "I'm sure it will," she replied smoothly. "The autumn weather has been quite mild this year." The conversation limped along for another 20 minutes, covering the weather, the state of the roads, the latest news from London, and every other topic that allowed them to avoid discussing the real reason for his visit. When the Earl finally made his excuses, urgent business in London, unexpected complications with his estate, Isadora felt nothing but relief. "Well," her father said after the Earl's hasty departure, "that could have gone better." "Could it?" Isadora asked, moving to the window to watch the Earl's carriage disappear down the drive with almost indecent haste. He lasted longer than Lord Ashford did, nearly a full half-hour before fleeing in terror. "Isadora, it's all right, father. I'm used to it by now." She turned from the window with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps we should consider lowering our standards. Maybe a widower with poor eyesight, or a man so desperate for funds that he's willing to overlook a wife who frightens small children." "You don't frighten anyone," Lord Ravenscroft said firmly. "You're a beautiful, accomplished young woman who has simply had the misfortune to encounter men too shallow to see past a minor imperfection." Minor imperfection. Isadora touched the scar that ran from her temple to her jaw, the raised line of tissue that had healed badly, despite the best medical care money could buy. "Father, I appreciate your loyalty, but we both know what I've become. The scar isn't minor, and it isn't going away." "Then we'll find a man who doesn't care about scars." "Such men don't exist, at least not in our social circle." Isadora moved toward the door, suddenly exhausted by the familiar conversation. "I think I'll retire early tonight. All this rejection is quite tiring." "Isadora, wait." Her father's voice stopped her at the threshold. "There's something else, another invitation." "From whom?" "The Duke of Shadowmere. He's hosting a masquerade ball next week and has specifically requested your attendance." Isadora frowned. The Duke of Shadowmere was a mysterious figure who rarely appeared in society, though his wealth and title made him the subject of considerable speculation. "Why would he request my attendance? We've never even met." "I don't know, but it's an opportunity, Isadora. A chance to meet someone new, someone who might see you differently." "A masquerade ball?" Isadora repeated thoughtfully. "Where everyone wears masks." "Exactly. Where your scar would be hidden, where you could be judged on your conversation and character rather than your appearance." For the first time in months, Isadora felt a flutter of something that might have been hope. A ball where she could hide behind a mask, where she could pretend to be the woman she had been before the accident, where she might, for one evening, feel beautiful again. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "Good. And Isadora, wear something magnificent. Remind yourself of the woman you truly are." That night, alone in her chambers, Isadora sat before her dressing table and studied her reflection in the small hand mirror that had survived her earlier outburst. The scar was as prominent as ever, a jagged reminder of the moment her life had changed forever. She had been 20, engaged to the heir of a neighboring estate, looking forward to a future filled with love and children and social success. Then had come the accident, a spooked horse, an overturned carriage, and the sharp edge of broken glass that had carved away her beauty and her dreams in a single moment. Her fiancé had broken their engagement within a week of the accident, claiming he couldn't bear to look at her damaged face. Her friends had gradually drifted away, uncomfortable with her transformation from beauty to beast. Society had labeled her a cautionary tale, a reminder that feminine worth was fragile and easily destroyed. But perhaps, for one night, she could forget all of that. Perhaps she could wear a mask and pretend to be someone else, someone whole and unmarked and worthy of love. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Isadora was in the garden, tending to the roses that had become her refuge from the world's stares, when Sarah appeared with obvious excitement. "My lady, there's a gentleman here to see you. Says he's from the Duke of Shadowmere." Isadora looked up from the roses, her gardening gloves dirty and her simple dress hardly suitable for receiving visitors. From the Duke? What could he want? He says he's here about the masquerade ball. Something about a special invitation. Curious despite herself, Isadora made her way to the drawing room, where a tall, elegant man waited with obvious patience. He was perhaps 40, with silver-touched hair and kind eyes that didn't flinch when they met hers. "Lady Isadora," he said, bowing formally, "I am Marcus Blackwood. Steward to His Grace the Duke of Shadowmere, I come bearing a message from my master." "A message?" "His Grace wishes me to convey his particular hope that you will attend his masquerade ball. He has heard of your situation and wishes to extend his personal assurance that you will be welcomed with the utmost respect and courtesy." Isadora felt heat rise in her cheeks. Even strangers knew about her situation now. How kind of His Grace to take pity on the local monster. "My lady," Marcus said gently, "I don't think you understand. His Grace doesn't pity you. He admires you." "Admires me? For what? My ability to clear a room with my appearance? For your courage in facing adversity with dignity, for your refusal to hide away despite society's cruelty, for remaining kind despite the unkindness shown to you." Marcus's voice was sincere and respectful. "His Grace has made it his business to know something of your character, and he finds it admirable." "His Grace has been investigating me." "His Grace makes it his business to know about interesting people, and you, Lady Isadora, are very interesting indeed." The conversation was growing stranger by the moment. Why would a duke be interested in a scarred spinster from the countryside? Perhaps that's a question you should ask him yourself. At the masquerade ball. Marcus produced an elegant envelope from his coat. "Your formal invitation, my lady. His Grace hopes you will do him the honor of attending." After Marcus left, Isadora opened the invitation with trembling fingers. The paper was of the finest quality, the script elegant and formal. But it was the postscript, written in a different hand, that made her breath catch. "Lady Isadora, I have heard that society has been unkind to you because of a scar that mars your face but not your spirit. I hope you will allow me the privilege of meeting a woman whose courage in the face of adversity has become legendary. A mask will hide your scar, but I hope you will not hide your true self." Legendary courage? Her true self? Isadora read the note 3 times, trying to understand what the mysterious Duke could possibly see in her that others had missed. "Sarah," she called, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "Send word to the dressmaker. I need a gown for a masquerade ball, something magnificent." "Really, my lady? You're going to attend?" "Yes," Isadora said, surprising herself with her certainty. "I'm going to attend, and for one night I'm going to remember what it feels like to be beautiful." The week that followed was a whirlwind of preparation. The dressmaker, thrilled to have such an important commission, created a gown that was nothing short of spectacular, deep emerald silk that brought out the green in Isadora's eyes, with intricate beadwork that caught the light like captured stars. The bodice was cut to emphasize her still perfect figure, while the flowing skirts moved like water with every step. But it was the mask that truly transformed her. Crafted from silk and adorned with emeralds and pearls, it covered the right side of her face completely, while leaving her unmarked left side visible. When she looked in the mirror, she saw not the scarred woman she had become, but an echo of the beauty she had once been. "You look magnificent, my lady," Sarah breathed as she made the final adjustments to Isadora's hair. "Like a fairy tale princess." "I feel like someone else entirely," Isadora admitted, studying her reflection with wonder. "Someone confident and beautiful and worthy of admiration." "You are all of those things, mask or no mask," Sarah said firmly. "The mask just helps you remember it." As Isadora's carriage rolled through the night toward Shadowmere Castle, she felt a mixture of excitement and terror that made her pulse race. She was about to enter a world where no one knew her story, where she could be judged on her wit and charm rather than her scars. For one night, she could be the woman she had been before the accident. For one night, she could be beautiful again. Shadowmere Castle rose from the mist, like something out of a Gothic novel, all soaring towers and mysterious shadows. Light blazed from every window, and the sound of music and laughter drifted across the grounds like an enchantment. As Isadora's carriage joined the line of elegant vehicles depositing masked guests at the grand entrance, she felt her courage begin to waver. What was she doing here? What if someone recognized her despite the mask? What if the mysterious Duke took one look at her and regretted his invitation? But it was too late for second thoughts. The carriage door opened, and a footman helped her down onto the red carpet that led to the castle's entrance. Around her, other guests moved in a glittering parade of silk and jewels and elaborate masks, their identities hidden behind feathers and gems and artistic creations. "Welcome to Shadowmere Castle," said a butler whose own mask was simple but elegant. "His Grace awaits in the ballroom." The castle's interior was even more magnificent than its exterior. Marble floors that reflected the light of crystal chandeliers, walls lined with priceless artwork, and an atmosphere of wealth and power that took Isadora's breath away. But it was the ballroom that truly stunned her. The vast space was decorated like an enchanted forest, with silk trees and flowers that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Hundreds of guests moved across the polished floor in a kaleidoscope of color and motion, their masks creating an air of mystery and magic. And presiding over it all, standing at the far end of the ballroom like a dark prince from a fairy tale, was a figure that made Isadora's breath catch in her throat. He was tall and lean, dressed in black that emphasized his pale skin and dark hair. His mask was simple but elegant, covering the upper half of his face while leaving his mouth and jaw visible. But it was his bearing that truly captured her attention. The way he held himself with absolute confidence, as if he owned not just the castle, but the very air around him. When his eyes found hers across the crowded ballroom, Isadora felt a jolt of electricity that made her knees weak. Even from a distance, even through the mask, there was something about his gaze that seemed to see straight through to her soul. The Duke of Shadowmere. It had to be. And he was looking at her as if she were the only person in the room. As he began to move toward her through the crowd, Isadora felt panic and excitement war in her chest. This was it, the moment that would determine whether her night would be magical or disastrous. She had no idea that she was about to meet not just a duke, but a king. A vampire king who had been searching for centuries for a woman brave enough to see past the monster to the man beneath. A king who would look at her scars and see not damage, but evidence of a strength that matched his own. The monster was about to meet her match, and neither of them would ever be the same again. The vampire king moved through the crowded ballroom like a shadow given form, his presence parting the sea of masked dancers without effort or acknowledgement. Adrian Drackle had attended 1,000 such gatherings over his 5 centuries of existence, but tonight felt different. Tonight he was hunting for something far more precious than blood. He was hunting for the woman whose courage had become legend in the supernatural world. Lady Isadora Ravencroft stood frozen near the ballroom's entrance, her emerald gown catching the light like captured starfire, and her mask doing nothing to hide the intelligence that blazed in her visible eye. She was even more magnificent than the reports had suggested, not despite her scars, but because of what they represented: strength, survival, the refusal to be broken by a world that valued only surface beauty. "Lady Isadora," he said as he reached her, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear, "I am honored by your presence." "Your Grace," she replied, her voice steady despite the rapid pulse he could hear beating in her throat. "Thank you for the invitation. Your castle is magnificent, as are you." The compliment was simple, direct, and utterly sincere. Adrian watched her visible eye widen with surprise, as if she hadn't heard such words in years. "Would you honor me with a dance?" Yes, of course." As he led her onto the dance floor, Adrian was acutely aware of the whispers that followed in their wake. His guests were speculating about the mysterious woman who had captured their host's immediate attention, but he cared nothing for their gossip. All that mattered was the woman in his arms, the way she moved with unconscious grace despite her obvious nervousness. "You're staring," Isadora said softly as they began to waltz. "I am," Adrian agreed without apology. "You're worth staring at, even with this?" She gestured subtly toward the mask that covered her scarred cheek. "Especially with that. Do you know what I see when I look at you, Lady Isadora? A woman trying to hide her disfigurement behind silk and pearls? I see a warrior who has survived a battle that would have destroyed lesser souls. I see someone who has faced the worst that life can offer and emerged with her spirit intact. Adrian's voice grew softer, more intimate. I see beauty that goes far deeper than skin. Isadora missed a step, her composure cracking for just a moment. You don't know what you're talking about. You haven't seen... I've seen enough. I've seen how you hold yourself with dignity despite society's cruelty. I've seen how you tend to your roses with gentle hands despite the pain in your heart. I've seen how you treat your servants with kindness despite having every reason to be bitter. You've been watching me, Isadora said, and there was no accusation in her voice, only wonder. I've been learning about you. There's a difference. Adrian spun her expertly through the steps of the waltz, his supernatural grace making her feel as if she were floating. Tell me, what do you see when you look at me? A man who's far too interested in a woman he barely knows, Isadora replied, but there was a hint of humor in her voice now. Look deeper. Isadora studied his face, what she could see of it beneath the mask. His jaw was strong, his mouth perfectly formed, his skin pale as moonlight. But it was his eyes that truly captured her attention. They were dark, almost black, and they held depths that spoke of experiences far beyond those of an ordinary man. I see someone who understands what it means to be different, she said finally. Someone who knows what it's like to be judged by appearance rather than character. Very perceptive, and what else? I see loneliness. The kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who can never truly understand you. Adrian's smile was brilliant and genuinely pleased. Remarkable. Most people see only the title and the wealth. You see the man beneath. Perhaps because I know what it's like to have people see only the surface. Isadora's voice grew thoughtful. What is it that makes you different, Your Grace? What sets you apart from other men? That, Adrian said softly, is a conversation for somewhere more private. Are you brave enough to find out? The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Isadora looked into his dark eyes and saw her own curiosity reflected there, along with something that might have been hope. I've spent 3 years being careful, being safe, hiding from the world's judgment, she said finally. Perhaps it's time to be brave again. Then come with me. Adrian led her from the ballroom through a maze of corridors lined with artwork that seemed to watch their passage with painted eyes. The castle was even more magnificent than Isadora had imagined, ancient tapestries depicting scenes of myth and legend, sculptures that looked as if they might come to life at any moment, and an atmosphere of power and mystery that made her pulse quicken. Where are we going? She asked as they climbed a spiral staircase that seemed to reach toward the stars. Somewhere we can speak freely. Somewhere I can show you who I truly am. Adrian paused at a heavy wooden door carved with intricate designs. But I should warn you, once you know my secret, there's no going back. You'll be part of a world that most humans never see. And if I'm not ready for that world, then I'll ensure you return to your life with no memory of this night, beyond a pleasant dance with a mysterious duke. Adrian's expression grew serious. But somehow, I don't think that will be necessary. I think you're stronger than you know. He opened the door to reveal a private study that took Isadora's breath away. The room was lined with books from floor to ceiling, their leather bindings gleaming in the light of a fire that crackled in an ornate fireplace. Ancient artifacts filled glass cases, and paintings that looked like they belonged in museums hung on the walls. But it was the view from the tall windows that truly stunned her. The castle was built on a cliff that overlooked a valley shrouded in mist, and the moon hung full and bright above the landscape like a silver coin. It's beautiful, she breathed. As are you, Adrian said, moving to stand behind her at the window. Even more so without the mask. Isadora's hand flew to her face, where the silk mask still covered her scars. I'd rather keep it on if you don't mind. I do mind, actually. Not because I'm ashamed of your scars, but because I want to see all of you. The woman who has captured my attention so completely deserves to be seen and appreciated in her entirety. You don't understand. The scar it's hideous. It frightens people. It doesn't frighten me. Adrian moved to face her, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. "May I?" Isadora stared into his dark eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and acceptance. Slowly, hardly daring to breathe, she nodded. Adrian's fingers were gentle as he untied the silk ribbons that held her mask in place. The delicate creation fell away, revealing the jagged scar that ran from her temple to her jaw, angry, raised tissue that spoke of pain and healing and the fragility of beauty. For a long moment, Adrian simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Isadora felt the familiar urge to cover her face, to hide the damage that had destroyed her life, but something in his gaze kept her still. "Magnificent," he said softly, his thumb tracing the air just above the scar without quite touching it. "Absolutely magnificent. You're mocking me. I'm telling you the truth. This scar doesn't diminish your beauty, it enhances it. It tells a story of survival, of strength, of a woman who refused to be broken by tragedy." Adrian's voice grew passionate. "Do you know what I see when I look at this scar? A ruined woman. I see proof that you're a warrior. I see evidence of battles fought and won. I see the mark of someone who has faced the worst and emerged stronger." Adrian's smile was tender and genuine. "I see beauty that goes far beyond the physical." Isadora felt tears prick her eyes, the first tears she had shed in months that weren't born of pain or frustration. "How can you say that? How can you look at this and see anything but damage?" "Because I understand what it means to be marked by circumstances beyond your control. Because I know what it's like to be judged by appearance rather than character." Adrian stepped back slightly, his expression growing serious. "Because I carry my own scars, Lady Isadora, ones that go far deeper than skin." "What do you mean?" "I mean that it's time I showed you who I truly am. What I truly am." Adrian's voice grew quiet, almost hesitant. "I'm trusting you with a secret that could destroy me if it fell into the wrong hands. I would never. I know you wouldn't. That's why I'm willing to share it." Adrian moved to the fireplace, his back to her, as he gathered his courage. "Lady Isadora, I am not entirely human." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I am a creature of legend, a being that most humans believe exists only in stories." Adrian turned to face her, and in the firelight his eyes seemed to glow with their own inner fire. "I am a vampire, Lady Isadora, the last of an ancient bloodline, cursed to live forever while watching everything I care about turn to dust." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and yet somehow inevitable. Isadora stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he had just revealed. "A vampire," she repeated slowly. "Yes, I have lived for over 500 years, sustained by blood and cursed with immortality. I am stronger than any human, faster than any mortal, and I will never age or die." Adrian's voice was steady, but she could hear the pain beneath it. "I am the monster that mothers use to frighten their children, the creature that lurks in nightmares and gothic novels. You're telling me the truth. I am. And I'm telling you because you, of all people, understand what it means to be judged by what you appear to be rather than who you truly are." Isadora moved closer to him, studying his face in the firelight. Now that she knew what to look for, she could see the signs. The too pale skin, the too perfect features, the eyes that held depths no mortal gaze could contain. "How long have you been alone?" she asked softly. The question clearly surprised him. "What? You said you've lived for 500 years watching everything you care about turn to dust. How long have you been alone?" Most of that time. Vampires don't form attachments easily, and when we do," Adrian's voice trailed off, "they end in loss. Always. Which is why I've spent centuries avoiding emotional entanglements, focusing on my duties as king of my kind rather than on personal happiness." "King?" "The vampire world has its own hierarchy, its own laws. I rule over the supernatural beings of this realm, ensuring that we remain hidden from human knowledge while maintaining order among our kind." Adrian's smile was rueful. "It's a lonely crown to wear. And yet you've revealed yourself to me. Why?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. Because when I heard about you, about the woman who had faced society's cruelty with such dignity, who had refused to hide despite the world's judgment, I knew I had found someone who might understand what it means to be different. You sought me out because of my scars. I sought you out because of your strength. The scars are simply evidence of battles you've survived, just as my vampirism is evidence of a curse I've learned to bear. Adrian moved closer, his voice growing tender. I've spent 5 centuries searching for someone who could see past the monster, to the man beneath. Someone brave enough to love a creature that shouldn't exist. And you think I'm that someone? I think you're the only someone. I think you're the woman I've been waiting for without even knowing I was waiting. Isadora felt the world tilt around her. A vampire. A king. Her creature of legend, who looked at her scars and saw beauty, who valued her strength more than her appearance. This is insane, she whispered. Completely. But the best things usually are. Adrian's smile was hopeful and vulnerable. The question is, are you brave enough to embrace the insanity? I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. Isadora moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit landscape while her mind raced. 3 hours ago, I was a scarred spinster attending a masquerade ball. Now I'm standing in a vampire king's study, being told that I'm the woman he's been waiting for. I know it's overwhelming. I know it's impossible to process all at once. Adrian joined her at the window, careful not to crowd her. But tell me, how do you feel? Not what you think you should feel, but what your heart tells you. Isadora considered the question seriously. How did she feel? Terrified, certainly. Confused, absolutely. But underneath the fear and confusion was something else, something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. I feel alive, she said finally. For the first time since the accident, I feel like someone sees me as more than just a damaged woman to be pitied or avoided. Because you are more, so much more. But a vampire, Adrian. You're a creature that feeds on blood, that exists outside the natural order. How could anything develop between us? The same way anything develops between any 2 people, slowly, carefully, with mutual respect and understanding. Adrian's voice was gentle but passionate. I'm not asking you to make any decisions tonight, Isadora. I'm simply asking you to consider the possibility that love might exist in forms you never imagined. Love? I'm falling in love with you, Adrian said simply. With your courage, your strength, your refusal to be broken by circumstances that would have destroyed lesser souls. I'm falling in love with a woman who looks at a vampire and asks not what he is, but how long he's been alone. Isadora turned to face him fully, studying his face in the moonlight. And if I could return those feelings, if I could love a vampire king, what then? Then I would spend eternity proving myself worthy of that love. I would give you everything I have, my kingdom, my protection, my devotion. Adrian's voice grew tender. I would show you that monsters can love as deeply as any man, perhaps more so because we understand how precious and rare true connection is. And the practical concerns? The fact that you're immortal and I'm human? The fact that you need blood to survive? All solvable if you wanted them solved. There are ways for humans to join their vampire partners in immortality, if they choose. As for blood, I feed only from willing donors who are well compensated for their contribution. I haven't killed for sustenance in over 2 centuries. You're offering me immortality. I'm offering you choices, the choice to remain human and live whatever span of years we're given together. The choice to join me in immortality if you decide you want forever. The choice to walk away from all of this and return to your normal life. Adrian's expression grew serious. But whatever you choose, I want you to know that you are valued, treasured, and worthy of love, exactly as you are. Isadora felt tears flow down her cheeks, tears of wonder and gratitude, and something that might have been joy. For 3 years, she had been told that her scars made her worthless, that her damaged face had destroyed any chance of happiness or love. Now a vampire king was telling her that those same scars made her beautiful, that her strength in surviving them made her worthy of a love that could last forever. I need time, she said finally, to think, to process all of this. Of course you do. Take all the time you need. Adrian moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her unmarked cheek. But Isadora. Yes. Don't let fear make the decision for you. Don't let the voices that have told you you're not worthy drown out the voice that's telling you this could be the beginning of something extraordinary. And if I decide I'm brave enough, if I decide I want to explore what this could become, then I will court you as you deserve to be courted. I will show you wonders you've never imagined and love you with a devotion that spans centuries. Adrian's smile was radiant with hope. I will make you my queen in every sense of the word. As Adrian escorted her back to the ballroom, where the masquerade continued in all its glittering splendor, Isadora felt as if she were moving through a dream. The other guests seemed less real somehow, their concerns and conversations trivial compared to the momentous choice that lay before her. Will I see you again? She asked as he prepared to hand her over to her waiting carriage. That depends entirely on you, Adrian replied. If you decide you want to see me again, I'll be waiting. If you decide this is all too much, too dangerous, too impossible, I'll understand. And if I want to see you but need more time to decide about everything else, then we'll take things slowly. We'll get to know each other as any couple would, supernatural circumstances aside. Adrian's smile was gentle and patient. I've waited 5 centuries for you, Isadora. I can wait a little longer. As her carriage rolled through the night toward home, Isadora touched her face where the mask had been, where her scars lay exposed to the moonlight. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel the need to hide them. A vampire king had looked at her damaged face and called her beautiful. He had seen her scars and declared them magnificent. He had offered her a love that could last forever and a crown that would make her queen of a hidden world. It was impossible, it was terrifying. It was everything she had never dared to dream. And for the first time since the accident, Isadora Ravencroft was ready to be brave again. 2 months later, the transformation of Isadora's life had been gradual but profound, like a flower blooming after a long winter. What had begun with a single extraordinary night had evolved into a courtship unlike anything she could have imagined, one conducted in moonlit gardens and candlelit libraries, where conversations ranged from poetry to philosophy to the intricate politics of the supernatural world. Adrian had been true to his word, courting her with a patience and devotion that took her breath away. He sent her books of poetry with pressed flowers marking his favorite verses. He appeared at her window on moonlit nights, inviting her for midnight rides through the countryside on horses that moved like shadows. He shared stories of his centuries of existence, painting pictures of historical events he had witnessed firsthand. But most importantly, he had never once made her feel like her scars were something to be hidden or overcome. Instead, he treated them as part of her beauty, tracing the air above them with reverent fingers while telling her stories of warriors and queens who had worn their battle marks with pride. You're different, Sarah observed one evening as she helped Isadora prepare for another of Adrian's visits. Happier, more yourself than you've been since the accident. I feel like myself again, Isadora admitted, studying her reflection in the mirror that had once been her enemy. For the first time in 3 years, I feel like a woman worthy of love. Because His grace sees you that way. Because He's helped me remember that I've always been that way. The accident didn't change who I am, it just made me forget. Isadora touched her scars gently, no longer flinching at the contact. These marks tell the story of what I've survived. They're not something to be ashamed of. And you're truly happy with him, despite what he is. Isadora considered the questions seriously. Adrian's vampiric nature had been startling at first, but as she had grown to know him, it had become simply another facet of the complex man she was falling in love with. He was gentle despite his supernatural strength, compassionate despite his predatory nature, and more human in his emotions than many mortal men she had known. I'm happier than I ever thought possible, she said finally. He sees me, Sarah. Not the scar, not the damaged goods that society thinks I've become, but me, the woman I truly am. Then I'm happy for you, my lady. You deserve love. And if you found it with a vampire duke, well, stranger things have happened. If only Sarah knew how much stranger things were about to become. Adrian arrived precisely at midnight, as had become his custom. Isadora met him in the garden, where the roses bloomed with unusual vigor, a side effect, Adrian had explained with amusement, of his supernatural presence encouraging plant growth. "You look radiant," he said, taking her hands in his and pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "More beautiful every time I see you." "Flatterer," Isadora replied, but she was smiling. "What adventure do you have planned for tonight?" "Actually, I was hoping we could simply talk. There's something important I need to discuss with you." The seriousness in his tone made Isadora's pulse quicken. "What is it? Walk with me?" They strolled through the moonlit garden in comfortable silence for several minutes, before Adrian spoke again. "Isadora, these past 2 months have been the happiest of my very long existence. Getting to know you, sharing my world with you, watching you bloom back into the confident woman you were always meant to be, it's been extraordinary." "For me as well," Isadora said softly. "You've given me back my life, Adrian, my sense of worth, my ability to see beauty in myself again. You've given me something I thought was lost forever, hope, the possibility of love, of partnership, of a future that holds more than just duty and loneliness." Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her, his dark eyes intense with emotion. "Which is why I need to ask you something." Isadora's heart began to race. "What?" "There's a gathering next week, a convocation of the supernatural nobility from across Europe. As king, I'm required to attend, and I need to present myself with a queen by my side." "A queen?" "The vampire world has been without a queen for over 3 centuries. My people need to see that their king has found his mate, that the royal line will continue." Adrian's voice grew tender. "I want that queen to be you, Isadora. I want you to stand beside me as my equal, my partner, my beloved. You're asking me to marry you. I'm asking you to become my queen in every sense of the word, to rule beside me, to share my immortal existence, to help me bridge the gap between the human and supernatural worlds." Adrian reached into his coat and withdrew a small velvet box. "I'm asking you to love me for eternity." The ring inside was unlike anything Isadora had ever seen. A blood-red ruby surrounded by diamonds that seemed to capture and hold the moonlight like tiny stars. When Adrian slipped it onto her finger, it fit perfectly, and she could swear she felt a tingle of magic as it settled into place. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It belonged to my mother. She was human when she married my father, and she chose to become a vampire for love." Adrian's voice was soft with memory. She always said that true love was worth any sacrifice, any transformation. "And you're offering me the same choice?" "I'm offering you everything I have. My crown, my kingdom, my heart, my eternity." Adrian's expression grew serious. "But I need you to understand what you'd be choosing. Becoming a vampire queen isn't just about immortality, it's about responsibility. You'd be helping me rule over beings who have lived for centuries, making decisions that affect the balance between our world and the human one. And if I'm not strong enough, if I can't handle that kind of responsibility, you are the strongest woman I've ever known. You've survived society's cruelty with grace, faced rejection with dignity, and emerged from tragedy with your compassion intact." Adrian's voice grew passionate. "You're exactly the kind of queen my people need, someone who understands what it means to be different, who can lead with both strength and empathy." "What would the transformation involve?" "A ritual that's been performed for millennia. I would share my blood with you, and you would share yours with me. The process is intense but not painful. When it's complete, you would be my equal in every way, immortal, powerful, and bound to me by ties that go deeper than any human marriage. Forever? Forever. No aging, no death, no separation except by choice." Adrian's smile was tender and hopeful. An eternity to love each other, to grow together, to explore all the wonders the world has to offer. Isadora looked down at the ring on her finger, its ruby heart seeming to pulse with its own inner fire. 3 months ago, she had been a scarred spinster with no prospects and no hope. Now she was being offered a crown, immortality, and a love that would last forever. "Yes, she said softly. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll become your queen. Yes, I want forever with you. Isadora rose on her toes to kiss him, pouring all her love and hope and excitement into the gesture. Yes, to all of it. Adrian's kiss in return was passionate and tender and full of promise for the centuries to come. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless with emotion. When? Isadora asked. The convocation is in 1 week. We could be married then, before the assembled supernatural nobility of Europe. It would be a statement of power and unity that would strengthen both our positions. A royal wedding? The most magnificent royal wedding the supernatural world has ever seen. You deserve nothing less. And the transformation? On our wedding night if you're ready. Or we can wait until you feel prepared. There's no rush, my love. We have all the time in the world. I don't want to wait, Isadora said firmly. I've spent 3 years waiting for my life to begin again. I want to start our eternity together as soon as possible. The week that followed was a whirlwind of preparation, unlike anything Isadora had ever experienced. Adrian's supernatural allies descended upon Shadowmere Castle to help plan what was being called the wedding of the century. The guest list read like a who's who of European supernatural nobility, vampire lords and ladies, werewolf alphas, powerful witches, and beings Isadora couldn't even identify. But it was her wedding dress that truly took her breath away. Created by a seamstress who was rumored to be a fairy godmother in truth as well as name, the gown was a masterpiece of ivory, silk, and silver thread that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The design was both elegant and regal, fit for a woman about to become queen. You look like a goddess, Sarah breathed as she made the final adjustments, like something out of a fairy tale. I feel like I'm living in a fairy tale, Isadora admitted, studying her reflection in the mirror. A year ago I thought my life was over. Now I'm about to become a vampire queen. Are you nervous? Terrified, Isadora said honestly, but also excited. I'm about to marry the man I love and become part of a world I never knew existed. How could I not be both terrified and thrilled? The ceremony itself took place in Shadowmere Castle's ancient chapel, under the light of a full moon that seemed to bless their union. The assembled guests were a sight to behold, beings of power and beauty who had lived for centuries, all gathered to witness their king claim his queen. But as Isadora walked down the aisle, her eyes were only for Adrian. He stood at the altar in formal court dress, his dark hair gleaming in the candlelight, and his eyes warm with love and pride. When she reached his side, he took her hands in his and smiled with such radiance that several guests actually gasped. "Dearly beloved," the vampire priest began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "We are gathered here tonight to witness the union of Adrian Dracul, king of the vampires, and Lady Isadora Ravencroft, who will become our queen. This is not merely a marriage, but a coronation, the joining of two souls who will rule together for eternity." The vows they exchanged were ancient and powerful, binding them not just as husband and wife, but as king and queen, partners in ruling the supernatural world. When Adrian placed a second ring on her finger, this one bearing the seal of the vampire royal house, Isadora officially became Queen Isadora Dracul. "You may kiss your bride, Your Majesty," the priest announced. Adrian's kiss was tender and passionate and full of promise for the centuries to come. When they finally broke apart, the chapel erupted in applause and cheers from beings who had lived for hundreds of years but had rarely seen love triumph so completely. But it was later, in the privacy of their chambers, that the true transformation took place. "Are you ready?" Adrian asked as they prepared for the ritual that would make her his immortal queen. "I've never been more ready for anything," Isadora replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what was about to happen. The transformation itself was unlike anything she could have imagined. Adrian's bite was not painful, but rather intensely pleasurable, sending waves of sensation through her entire body. As her human blood flowed out and vampire blood flowed in, she felt herself becoming something new, something more than she had been before. When it was over, she opened eyes that now saw the world with supernatural clarity. Colors were more vivid, sounds more distinct, and she could sense the magical energy that flowed through everything around her. "How do you feel?" Adrian asked, his voice filled with concern and hope. "Alive," Isadora said wonderingly, her voice now carrying the subtle resonance of supernatural power. "More alive than I've ever felt before." She looked around their chambers with her new vision and gasped. "Everything is so intense, so beautiful." "Including you," Adrian said, pulling her into his arms. "You're magnificent, my queen, absolutely magnificent." Isadora moved to the mirror that dominated one wall of their chamber, studying her reflection with wonder. The transformation had enhanced everything about her. Her skin was now luminous. Her hair seemed to shine with its own inner light, and her eyes held depths that spoke of immortal power. But it was her scars that truly amazed her. Instead of the angry red marks she had carried for 3 years, they now appeared as delicate silver lines that caught the light like precious metal. They were still there, still part of her story, but they had been transformed into something beautiful rather than something to be hidden. "My scars," she whispered, touching the silver lines with wonder, "are now marks of power rather than pain," Adrian said, joining her at the mirror. "The transformation doesn't erase our past, my love. It transforms it into something beautiful." They're silver. "The mark of a vampire queen. Your scars have become a crown, Isadora, a visible sign of the strength that made you worthy to rule beside me." As they stood together before the mirror, king and queen, vampire and newly turned immortal, Isadora reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as a woman society called a monster because of her scars. She had become a queen whose scars were now a symbol of her power and strength. "Any regrets?" Adrian asked, reading her thoughts. "None," Isadora said firmly. "How could I regret a choice that led to all of this? How could I regret finding love and purpose and a crown that I actually deserve to wear? What about your human life, your mortality?" "What life? What mortality? I was already dead, Adrian. Dead to society, dead to hope, dead to the possibility of love. You didn't take my humanity. You gave it back to me." Isadora turned in his arms, her silver-scarred face radiant with joy. "You saw a monster and made her a queen. I saw a queen who had been told she was a monster. There's a difference. And now I see my wife, my partner, my equal. I see the woman who will help me rule with wisdom and compassion for the next 1,000 years." Adrian's smile was tender and full of promise. "I see my forever." 100 years later, Queen Isadora Dracul stood on the balcony of Shadowmere Castle, looking out over the kingdom she and Adrian had built together. The supernatural world had changed dramatically over the past century, becoming more integrated with human society while maintaining the secrecy that kept both worlds safe. Much of that progress was due to her efforts. As queen, she had established schools for young supernatural beings, created laws that protected both humans and immortals, and built bridges between communities that had been separated by fear and misunderstanding for millennia. But perhaps most importantly, she had become a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever been told they were less than worthy because of their appearance or circumstances. "Your Majesty," said Elena, her vampire lady-in-waiting, "the delegation from the American territories has arrived. They're requesting an audience. Of course, show them to the throne room. I'll be there shortly." As Eleanor departed, Adrian appeared at Isadora's side, his presence as comforting and thrilling as it had been on their wedding night a century ago. "Another diplomatic crisis?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist. "Another opportunity to prove that different doesn't mean dangerous," Isadora replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. "The American vampires are having trouble integrating with the werewolf packs in their territory. They need mediation. And they came to the queen who's famous for building bridges between impossible differences. They came to the woman who understands what it means to be judged by appearance rather than character." Isadora touched her silver scars, which had become her trademark, a symbol of strength rather than damage. Sometimes the best diplomats are those who've learned to see past the surface. Over the past century, Isadora's scars had become legendary in the supernatural world. Young vampires who struggled with their transformation, werewolves who felt like monsters, witches who had been persecuted for their gifts, all came to seek counsel from the queen, who wore her battle marks like a crown. "The delegation can wait a few more minutes," Adrian said, his voice taking on the intimate tone that still made her pulse quicken after 100 years of marriage. "I have something more important to discuss. More important than international supernatural relations. Much more important. It's about us." Isadora turned in his arms, studying his face with the enhanced vision that allowed her to see every nuance of his expression. "What about us?" "I've been thinking about what you said last month, about wanting to expand our family." Isadora's breath caught. They had discussed the possibility of children several times over the decades, but vampire reproduction was complex and rare. It required not just love, but a deep magical bond that few immortal couples ever achieved. And I think we're ready. I think our bond is strong enough, our love deep enough to create new life. Adrian's smile was tender and hopeful. "I want to have a child with you, Isadora, an heir who will carry on our legacy of building bridges between worlds. A vampire child, a child who will inherit the best of both of us, your compassion and wisdom, my strength and knowledge. A prince or princess who will grow up understanding that true power comes from lifting others up rather than tearing them down." Isadora felt tears, vampire tears that sparkled like diamonds, flow down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want that too. Really, really. I want to teach our child that scars are signs of strength, that being different is a gift, that love can conquer any obstacle." Isadora smiled through her tears. "I want to show them that monsters can become royalty, if they have the courage to embrace who they truly are." As they held each other on the balcony overlooking their kingdom, Isadora reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as a woman society called a monster because of her scars. She had become a queen whose scars were now symbols of hope for anyone who had ever felt different or damaged. But more than that, she had learned that true beauty came not from perfection, but from the courage to be authentically yourself. Her scars told the story of her survival, her strength, her refusal to be broken by circumstances beyond her control. "Adrian," she said softly. "Yes. My love? Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing a queen when the world saw a monster, for kissing my scars and calling them beautiful, for building me a kingdom where being different is celebrated rather than condemned." Isadora's voice grew strong with conviction. "For proving that the most beautiful love stories are written not on perfect skin, but on hearts brave enough to love without conditions. Thank you for accepting my love. Thank you for becoming my queen and helping me build something beautiful out of the darkness." Adrian's red eyes were warm with emotion. "Thank you for showing me that monsters can become men when they find someone brave enough to love them. And what have we become? We've become proof that love sees past the surface to the soul beneath. We've become a legend that will inspire others for centuries to come." Adrian's smile was radiant with love and pride. "We've become exactly who we were always meant to be." As the sun set over Shadowmere Castle and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, the Vampire King and his scarred queen prepared to face another evening of ruling their kingdom together. But first, they would hold each other close and remember the night when a woman society called a monster met a king who called her beautiful. They had built something extraordinary together, not just a marriage but a legacy that proved love could transform any curse into a crown. And in the quiet moments before duty called them back to their thrones, they continued their eternal dance of devotion, two souls united by their belief that true beauty came from the courage to love and be loved exactly as you are. The monster had become a queen, and her scars had become a crown that would shine for all eternity. In the distance, carried on the night wind, came the sound of hope. Young supernatural beings finding their place in the world, outcasts discovering they belonged, and hearts learning that love was indeed the most powerful magic of all. It was the sound of a love story that had begun with rejection and blossomed into acceptance, that had transformed scars into symbols of strength. And that proved beyond any doubt that sometimes the most beautiful queens are those who have learned to wear their battle wounds like jewels. The Vampire King had kissed the monster and called her queen, and together They had built a kingdom where everyone could find their happily ever after. What an absolutely breathtaking journey of transformation and self-acceptance we just experienced. From that heartbreaking opening where Isadora shattered the mirror rather than face her scarred reflection, to Adrian's first glimpse of her at the masquerade ball, to that gorgeous moment when he called her scars magnificent, every single moment had me completely captivated. The way Adrian saw Isadora's scars not as damage, but as proof of her warrior spirit just melted my heart completely. And watching her go from hiding behind masks to wearing her silver-transformed scars like a crown as vampire queen. Pure perfection. That scene where he revealed his vampire nature and she asked, "How long have you been alone?" instead of running away, was absolutely iconic. I'm still getting emotional thinking about how her scars became silver marks of power after her transformation, turning what society called monstrous into something truly royal. The symbolism of beauty coming from strength rather than perfection was just chef's kiss perfect. Which moment hit you hardest? Was it when Adrian first removed her mask and called her magnificent? When he revealed his vampire nature and she chose to stay? Or that gorgeous transformation scene where her scars became silver marks of queenly power? If this story of finding love beyond appearances, vampire royalty, and scars that become crowns moved your soul, smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Your support helps me bring you more tales where love sees past the surface to the beautiful soul beneath. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think you could have been as brave as Isadora in accepting Adrian's vampire nature? And what did you think of the way her scars were transformed from symbols of damage into marks of royal power? Plus, I'm dying to know which moment of their courtship gave you the most goosebumps. Next week, I'm bringing you another heart-stopping supernatural romance. She was cursed to age backwards until the Time Lord promised her forever. Get ready for temporal magic, impossible love, and a heroine who discovers that sometimes the greatest curses hide the most beautiful destinies. Until then, remember that the most beautiful love stories are written on hearts brave enough to see past scars to the strength beneath, and that true queens are crowned not by perfection, but by the courage to love and be loved exactly as they are.